So I'm going on a walk and I think it's supposed to storm any minute here. I don't know what that was, but I have to get home. I think this is a Ruby Storm. Let's talk about what a Ruby Storm is first. Storm is this mechanic where a spell is copied for every other spell that was cast this turn on the stack. In Ruby Storm, you're casting spells like Grape Shot or Empty the Worms out of the sideboard or Wishboard. So you're casting as many spells as possible and attempting to kill them in one go by putting a ridiculous amount of Grape Shot or Empty the Worms on the stack. When you play this deck, you're going to be using cost reducers like Ral or Ruby Medallion in an attempt to actually profit mana with your mana producers, draw cards for really, really less, be able to keep the storm going until you can actually kill with that Grape Shot. You have mana positive spells like the Rituals, and card positive spells like Ren's Resolve and Reckless Impulse and Glimpse the Impossible to, again, just keep that mana going, have enough mana, and keep that storm going. And once you burn out, you can do it all again with Past in Flames, so again with all of these cost-reducing permanents on the battlefield, or you can wish for things that can continue the storm or just kill your opponent. I think I'm finally getting up to my home. I need to get out of the storm.
Okay, I'm hiding under the table, and I think this should get me away from the craziness that's going on outside. So let's talk about the cards that go into Ruby Storm, starting with the lands. So this is a red-white deck, so obviously we're playing mountains, and we're playing red fetch lands like Wooded Foothills, Scalding Tarn, Arid Mesa. You can even play Bloodstained Mire if you'd like, to be able to reliably fetch our red sources, but also our red-white sources, like Elegant Parlor, so we can surveil and get rid of cards and be able to, you know, have the top of our deck properly treat us goodly, and Sacred Foundry so that we can have untapped white sources. We're also playing an Arena of Glory, essentially so that we can bring back our sideboarded Flage and immediately be able to attack. And it's kind of a just win very often, and it's worth having a slightly worse land in every other situation. Our cost reducers are Ral Monsoon Mage, which is a 2-mana 1/3 that reduces the cost of instant sorceries by 1. And then when you cast an instant sorcery spell, you flip a coin. If you lose the flip, it deals 1 damage to you. If you win the flip, you can flip Ral into the other side of the card, which is Ral Leyline Prodigy. Ral Leyline Prodigy starts with an extra loyalty counter dependent on basically your storm count. Its +1 is instant sorcery spells cost 1 less, so it's the same thing as the other side. Its -2 is it deals 2 damage divided as you choose among 2 targets, and then draw a card if you control a blue permanent other than Ral, which that will never happen. And its -8 essentially says win the game. You exile the top 8 cards of your library, and you can cast any instant sorceries for free, and that's just extremely, extremely mana positive. What you really want to do with this card is wait until you have Storm 6, and then flip it and immediately ult. It's worth taking the damage most of the time. The other cost reducer card is Ruby Medallion, where every red card costs 1 less. And then once we have those cost reducers on the battlefield, we can play cards like Desperate Ritual, Manamorphose, and Pyretic Ritual to be able to actually be mana positive. Desperate Ritual and Pyretic Ritual costing 2 mana, 1 mana if we have one of the cost reducers on the battlefield, and adding 3 red to our mana pool, which means we can cast more spells. Manamorphose letting us draw a card, add 2 colors to our mana pool. Normally we're just going to pick double red. And it costs 2 mana, so normally it's mana even and you draw a card, but if you have a cost reducer, you actually profit 1 mana and are able to draw a card. Then we're able to play the card positive cards like Reckless Impulse and Ren's Resolve, which effectively do the same thing. They're 2 mana, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. That allows us to use our mana to go card positive, to cast even more spells beyond what's in our hand. And if you really want to, it's till the end of your next turn, so you can cast them past the turn and set up a storm the following turn. Another card positive card is Glimpse the Impossible, where you exile the top 3 cards of your library. You can cast them only this turn, so it's kind of the worst card in our deck. We're going to find that out when we start sideboarding. Then if any remain in exile in your end step, you get an 0/1 Eldrazi Scion, which you can sacrifice to add a colorless mana to our mana pool, which can become relevant over time and gives us even more mana to be able to cast more spells and storm off with. We're also playing a Strike It Rich, which is one of those, like, you pay a mana this turn so that later on you have more mana. It creates a treasure, and you can pay 3 mana to create another treasure, which you can sacrifice to have mana of any color. And the way we really go off is casting Past in Flames after we've stormed, which gives everything in our graveyard flashback, which means you can cast everything in our graveyard, go mana positive, go card positive, until we have enough storm to actually kill our opponent, preferably with a card like Grape Shot, which has storm, so copy it for every spell that we have cast before it, and it deals 1 damage to our opponent. Hopefully we can just deal 20 damage and kill them. Now, alongside all of this, we also are playing Wish, which allows us to play a card from outside the game during the turn that we cast Wish. Now, in competitive Magic, that means from your sideboard. So we're playing a lot of cards in our sideboard that we don't really ever bring in when we're sideboarding. It's called a Wish board. So just a bunch of cards that we can cast off of Wish. Things like Grape Shot, so that you don't have to dig for the Grape Shot, you can cast Wish and just kill your opponent. Alchemist Gambit, which allows us to kill through the One Ring. Normally when we're doing Alchemist Gambit, we also want to wish for Empty the Warrens so that we can empty the Warrens, Alchemist Gambit, take our extra turn, attack with all of these goblins. Galvanic Relay, which allows us to exile cards from the top of our deck. We can cast them next turn, not this turn. And it has Storm, so if we feel like we're gonna peter out, we can use our last bit of mana to wish for Galvanic Relay, exile 6 or 7 or whatever cards, how many you stormed for, and then set up a really strong storm the following turn. And then another Pass in Flames, because then we can use the wishes in our main deck to be Pass in Flames. So we can effectively run 7 Pass in Flames, 3 in our main deck, 4 wishes in our main deck, and to grab the 1 in our sideboard, because Pass in Flames is really relevant and really important to be able to storm off. And things that we can grab with Wish, but normally we're going to be siding in, are Orim's Chant. Target player can't cast spells this turn. The spell was kicked. Creatures can't attack this turn. Really, it's the cast spells thing. It stops other combo decks and other storm decks, and really good against Cascade decks, but also is really good to just cast to like beat a counterspell deck, or just bait a counterspell and then continue. Playing 4 Static Prisms because there's a lot of cards that just beat us if they have them. Things like Rest in Peace or Leyline of the Void, or even just straight up various anti-storm cards. And it can just like be our answer to creatures that are really aggressive and we're worried about killing them before they kill us. And we're playing Flage, Titan of Fire's Fury, which is a 3-mana 6/6. We have to sacrifice it if we don't escape it, but when it enters the battlefield, we lightning helix something. We deal 3 damage to something, we gain 3 life. And then we can pay 4 mana and exile 5 cards from our graveyard to be able to escape it, which means it stays on the battlefield for 4 mana. We play this card very much against decks that are aggressive and we're worried about killing us before we kill them. We can gain life and have a threat and something that they have to answer. And then it's also really good against decks that stop us from storming. It gives us an alternate win condition, especially since decks often side out of some amount of removal because really all they can kill is Ral. Anyway, let's check on the storm that's going on outside.
Oh, it's crazy out there. But let's talk about some of the combos and synergies that go along with Ruby Storm. First off, sometimes you're gonna draw into more cost reducers, and really you have to do the math and see if those cost reducers are going to profit you mana over time and if it's worth casting them. Because sometimes it's just not worth casting the additional cost reducers if you already have one in the battlefield. In most cases, you don't immediately wanna flip Ral. You only wanna flip him when you can just ultimate, which means at Storm 6 is when you wanna flip Ral. And there are some really cool ways that you can kind of abuse this. Specifically, a lot of our rituals are instant. And if you have Ral on the battlefield and hold priority, you can cast multiple instants, build up to Storm 6, and then have that many flips to be able to flip him, rather than casting them 1 by 1 by 1 by 1, and then on the 6th spell just hoping that it flips Ral. Because remember, if you flip it when it's at Storm 6, you kind of just win the game. Exiling the top 8 cards, being able to cast instant sorceries off of them is just insane. Remember, your impulse effects can set up a strong next turn if you're not going to storm this turn. There's no point in holding on to it if you're going to storm next turn. Again, same thing with Wish Galvanic Relay. And remember, like I said, Alchemist Gambit to Empty the Warrens is just as good as a Grape Shot, and specifically as a way to kill through protection of the One Ring, because damage can't be prevented, and yes, we can't target them, because they still have protection, but we can attack them. So we empty the Warrens, take an extra turn, damage can't be prevented, and then jam. Remember, Desperate Ritual has Splice into Arcane, which means you can pay some extra mana to add a Desperate Ritual's effect to a Desperate Ritual on a stack, or an Arcane spell on the stack, which is Desperate Ritual. This comes up way more than you think, and please be aware of it. Remember, Ral only discounts instant and sorceries, so if you happen to be playing something like Blood Moon in the sideboard, you ain't getting the discount, but Ruby Medallion does. Also, another really cool interaction is if your opponent exiles your graveyard in response to a Pass in Flames, which is a really good way to hate Storm out, you can let the graveyard hate resolve while Pass in Flames is still on the stack, and then cast a bunch of instants and sorceries to storm off properly, and then let Pass in Flames resolve, which will give those things you just cast flashback. It's really, really sweet and kind of negates graveyard hate. Oh, the storm's getting crazy. We should get away from the windows. All right, we're gonna have to keep talking about this in the basement because I really don't know where else I can escape the storm that's going on outside. It really is just a truly scary deck. But let's talk about flex slots in the deck, because a lot of the cards in the deck you absolutely need to play. But if you look at my list, the flex slots that I'm running are the Fourth Wish, Strike It Rich, Valakut Awakening, Arena of Glory, and Grape Shot. Now, in those slots, you can play a bunch of different cards, but there's a couple things you can do. Some people are playing up to 3 Strike It Rich just to set up Storm for their following turn. And some decks splash green with Stomping Ground for Goblin and Archomancer in the main deck just for more cost reducing spells, and some in the sideboard. And that also opens up some green sideboard slots like Pick Your Poison, Nature's Claim, and most importantly, Veil of Summer, so you don't really have to Orm's Chant into like a counterspell. As far as flex slots in the sideboard, some people aren't playing Gigantha, but I found that it wins me some amount of games, so I want to make sure I do that. Some people are playing Galvanic Relay because Galvanic Relay is setting up a following turn and is kind of admitting failure. And some people are playing like Underworld Breach instead of that card so that you can continue storming in the same turn. Some people aren't playing Orm's Chant, especially the green versions of the deck. Some people aren't playing Flage and are just focusing really, really heavily on the storm part of it and not playing these alternate win conditions like I am. And some people just aren't playing Static Prison and are just trying to be more consistent. But that one seems kind of rough. Now in these slots, you can play things like up to 2 or 3 Blood Moon to just lock our opponent out of the game and give ourselves as much time as possible to storm off really easily. Some people are playing Flame Slash to be able to destroy hate creatures and things like that. Some are playing Shattering Spree for a wish board for these artifact decks. And like I said, Underworld Breach often as a direct replacement for a Galvanic Relay to be able to continue storming in the same turn rather than setting up a storm the following turn. Sounds like the storm's calming down outside. I'm getting tired. Let's go to bed to finish this out. Now that I'm cozied up in bed to escaping that storm that was going on outside, let's talk about how to beat other decks when we play Ruby Storm. The most important part of that is sideboarding. Since this deck is super redundant, you have to be super careful about what you side out because you don't want to ruin your main deck. Also, remember, a lot of the cards in our sideboard is like a wish board, so we don't really ever bring a lot of the cards in because we plan on just wishing for it. Generally, when sideboarding, the biggest thing to remember is that Glimpse the Impossible is probably our worst card, and sideboarding that out is never really wrong. That being said, let's look at the top 10 most popular decks. First off, Ruby Storm, we're going to be bringing in Orm's Chant because we can stop our opponent from storming kind of mid-storm because it can stop them from casting spells because a lot of them are sorcery and they can't really do it in response. And we're going to bring out 2 Glimpse the Impossible. So that is how we sideboard against Ruby Storm. Against Living End, we're going to be doing the exact same thing because it's a combo deck, but we're going to be casting Orm's Chant in response to the Cascade trigger so they can't actually cascade into anything. So again, into Orm's Chant, out to Glimpse the Impossible. Rakdos Scam, at the moment of making this video, is the 3rd most popular deck, where we're going to be bringing in 3 Static Prism to be able to deal with their really scary creatures and their Leyline of the Void and their Dothy Voidwalker, which can get rid of our graveyard. We're going to be bringing in all of the Flage to be able, again, to deal with the Dothy Voidwalker and Regavan and a bunch of their scary things, and as an alternate win condition, if they're able to actually exile our graveyard. We're going to be bringing out all 3 Past in Flames because we can't really rely on our graveyard, and if we really are storming properly, we can just wish for Past in Flames. We're bringing out a Strike It Rich and then 2 Pyretic Ritual because we can't really rely super heavily on storming without our graveyard. And so it's going to require quite a bit of setup and relying on Flage while still threatening the storm. So again, in 3 Static Prism, in 3 Flage, out 3 Past in Flames, out 1 Strike It Rich, and out 2 Pyretic Ritual. Against Bant Nadu, another combo deck, we're able to just bring in 2 Orm's Chant and bring out 2 Glimpse the Impossibles. Again, Orm's Chant disrupting the combo as much as possible and actually stopping them from countering our stuff. Against Jeskai Control, we're bringing in Orm's Chant to be able to cast at the beginning of our turn to stop these counterspells. We're also bringing in 3 Flage as an alternate win condition because against a counterspell deck, they're pretty good at stopping the storm, and it's important that we threaten them from multiple angles. That being said, we're going to be bringing out some of our redundancies and cards that don't really do anything by themselves. Things like Strike It Rich, we're bringing out 1. We're bringing out 1 of the Wishes because that's the 4th wish is a flex slot anyway. Bringing out 3 Glimpse the Impossibles and 1 Pyretic Ritual just to trim down on redundancies while still threatening the storm. Same thing as like Rakdos Scam. Against Amulet Titan, on the play, we're bringing in 2 Orm's Chant, bringing out 2 Glimpse the Impossibles like we do against most combo decks. We can kind of stop them from comboing, especially casting Orm's Chant in response to some of these bounce lands and in response to things like the Amulet triggers. So when we know they're going off and we know they can't cast a Titan, it's really, really funny. But on the draw, we're bringing in these 2 Orm's Chant, but we're also bringing in 4 Static Prisms because we need to be able to answer the Amulet because they're faster than us when they're on the play. We're going to be bringing out 4 Glimpse the Impossible, 1 Strike It Rich, and 1 Wish. Against Yawgmoth, they're bringing in 4 Static Prisms to deal with their creatures and their combo, and then also sometimes they bring in Leyline of the Void against us. We're not bringing in Flage because it doesn't really kill anything efficiently in our opponent's deck, at least that we care about. We're bringing out 1 Wish, 1 Strike It Rich, and 2 Glimpse the Impossibles. Against Tron, I don't want any changes. We're just trying to storm off and kill him. Against Gruul Prowess, we're bringing in 4 Static Prisms and 3 Flage. Static Prisms to be able to deal with the creatures, Flage to be able to deal with the creatures and gain some life. We're going to be bringing out a lot of these redundancies like we've seen in the past. Things like 1 Strike It Rich, we're going to bring out 1 Wish, we're going to bring out 1 Pyretic Ritual, and all 4 Glimpse the Impossibles. And lastly, the 10th most popular deck is Boros Energy, where we're going to be bringing in 4 Static Prisms and 3 Flage, and doing the same thing as Gruul Prowess. We're going to be bringing out 1 Strike It Rich, 1 Wish,
1 pyretic ritual, and all 4 glimpse the impossibles, because we want to make sure that we can kill them before they kill us.
I'm getting ready for bed now, and all in all, this Ruby Storm is strong, very fast, but the issue is that it's super easy to hate out. There's so many hate cards for Storm. However, it's a really good check on the format because it forces our opponent to run cards just for hating on Storm. And if they don't, then Storm just obliterates them. The other thing I love about this deck is that it's super consistent. But that's it for me. If you like this video and like deep dives like this, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. What was that? Did you hear that? Is something coming through the breach?